there's something really fun about being like young in New York because of all the things you can do all the time. Like I was I was in sort of the Amtrak tunnel under Riverside Park, um, and there's like a hole in the gate near 125th to go in. There's like really cool graffiti in there. Um, so there was one time I went in there, and then the Amtrak police showed up.
It's the difference, and it's the variety, and it's the like beauty of having all these different people in one place at the same time. And it's not, that's what makes the city beautiful.
What was one of your favorite things about New York City? Growing up or now,
My favorite thing about New York City growing up was I'd go with my friends and we would just walk. The weather's nice, like you really can just walk around and entertain yourself. You don't have to have money, you don't have to like go shopping or go to the movies or like spend money. You can just walk around and get food, like the bare minimum.
What was your community sense like? Did you feel like you had a good sense of community outside of your family, or did you feel like you were pretty, isolated with your friends in school and your family specifically?
I felt like it was a really great sense of community in Washington Heights specifically, in my immediate vicinity. Knows me, knows my mom, like the corner store, I know everyone's name there. Like you go to your corner store. If you go to another corner store, you're rude. So I think there's a really great sense of community, at least like where and when I grew up. I feel like maybe that's changing a lot now, but
We knew the city is always under construction, always like a complex going up, some building no one can afford. And then of course that happened to our building. And we would have like lawyers of the landlords would like walk around on our block and try to see who's living in what apartment, if anyone has any violations, to try to like kick people out. And so one day like all these people were gone. People really fought to keep these apartment buildings. There was even like a group created, and there'd be like a weekly meeting to discuss like what protests there's gonna be, to discuss like petitions and like things we could actually do to stop this. But eventually like my whole building, except for me and two other families, had to leave. So obviously big lawyers and people with money are more powerful.
I remember being in high school and getting into a really affluent school on 44th Street, and it would take me 2 hours to get there, because I was so far displaced from the city that like I felt like I wanted to be a part of, and that was really that affected my personality, my psychosis, my feeling on people who live in the city, who travel in the city, and who take that time, that energy to move through the city to get where they need to go and to live the lives that they want to live.
it's really strange, especially when people are like, "Oh, like I really want to be in New York City." And I'm like, usually either from like West Coast or Middle America, and they're just like, "Oh, like I really want to be in New York City," and like, yeah, that's a cool experience, but because it's your experience for a couple of years, and you pull in like another 8 roommates in a tiny Brooklyn home, everyone else around you is suffering because of that. But I never attributed it to gentrification until I took a sociology class. And that's how everything happens. It's like, oh, I learned about this terrible thing that I've noticed all the time, and now I'm putting a name to it. I'd seen these as terrible things, but I didn't not know it as a systemic problem until I was given the verbiage for it.
This is not a coincidence. It's not like, an accident. Like, people want the city to be a certain way.
So you talk about like how like first being in New York City and seeing these people doing that, and then coming to Bard and seeing those people before they do that.
I think when I first got to Bard, I was just shocked. Like, I was actually shocked at like people's view of New York City, and two, like how many people just want to move to New York City, or like who have the means to do that, have the means to like go to the city every weekend and like rent an Airbnb, or even like their parents have a second apartment there. Like, I was just shocked.
it's just two different worlds. Like, it's just two different worlds of like privilege and power and entitlement. And it's so subversive and it's so subterranean the way that like these structures and these dynamics like pull and push the way that people move in the city. And I kind of just feel bad.
Bard showed me how wealth is like so tied to space and like who has access to space. And like these rich people are very used to having their own space, and they're coming in and they want that space, you know, like this, their own that, like everything's their own. They always have space to themselves. They always have like this private place to be and to go, whereas other people who aren't as privileged are used to sharing space, used to giving up space, used to being in tight places, and that's just something you grow up with and get used to.
Like the world that you're going to be living, if you're an affluent person and experiencing New York City, is not going to be the world that I understand New York City to be.
It's a great place to work. It's a great place to start a career. I just think people need to be aware of whose space they're in, the history of that space, and like what does the city actually mean to you, not just how it makes you look.
People really need to think about the ways that they're appropriating or disappropriating or forgetting the things that make the city beautiful. Otherwise, it would just be Minnesota.
Who's New York City being built for now is most of those crazy developments, high-rises, are crazy inaccessible for the vast majority of people that actually live in New York City.
I think about like moving back to Washington Heights, and like even then, like isn't that a little bit a form of gentrification?
I mean, being from the community means something different, but receiving the education and status that comes with that afterwards, again, reproduces the same problem.
Where do you find yourself in this new New York City being created?
I think it's very difficult because I don't like life in small towns. I don't like the way life is at Bard. Like, I'm a city person. Does that mean I have to move back to New York City? Like, I don't know. I would like to, but then there's also a part of me that's kind of like, this is not the city I grew up with. So even if I'm moving back to the same exact apartment I grew up in, I think we all need to just think about what the city is now, because it's not the same as before.
So no, New York City's, I don't think, being developed in most ways for its current residents. That sucks.
You need to step out of yourself and have a sort of existential understanding of like what makes the city the city. It's so crowded and it's so populated, but like there's something gorgeous about walking down the street in Times Square and owning every single step that you take. Like every single step you take, like that part of the city is yours, and I think that's really nice and really gorgeous to know that the city is everyone's and no one's at the same time.